All right. It says it's recording, fancy intro music. I'm just kidding. I'm not a Gen Z or a millennial. I don't have that kind of free time. Uh, anyway, a little bit of a switch up in format. I think tonight we got feedback on the Year Zero engine in general. Not specifically for Neon Blood Year Zero, but it pertains to Neon Blood Year Zero, and it pertains to a lot of the stuff that, on my side of the house that I'm working on. So I asked one of our backers kind of why the group wasn't gelling with Year Zero engine, and or Neon Blood Year Zero, but it really sounded like, and I think you agree, it sounded like it was more of the Year Zero engine in general. So he gave me some really good feedback points, and then we come up with the topic of like, hey, we should probably talk about this sound really mean. Understanding mechanics of a game you go into, super vital. And that there's always like this amazing amount of advice on how to be a better GM and 10 steps to being a better player and 10 steps to being a power paladin. All of that is nonsense. None of that is going to work for you. Mostly because people miss the first step, that mechanics make the game. And I'm not talking about how D&D can't do space. I don't give a crap about that. D&D can, in fact, do space. It's in the DMG. They have guns and all that jazz. It depends on where your understanding of the mechanics are. And I think that's probably the fundamental flaw for a lot of systems and players, probably players on their end. They get into a system and it doesn't gel with them. But I've got a secondary concern, and I mentioned that to Rich, and we'll put a pin in it. And because I'm old and forgetful, I'm going to write it down and put it in front of me too. I think there's a secondary reason that is very likely the primary reason people play certain games and not others, and they refuse to learn other games to the degree they'll learn their primary interest game. But anyway, is that fair, Rich?
Yeah, that's fair. Well, and I will say, I'm going to respond to something you said.
Yeah.
D&D can do space. Sure, it can.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it does it well. And it doesn't mean that it's going to feel like a good sci-fi game.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that people need to remember is that systems can support a genre, and it can support a feel. And that's one thing that I like about Year Zero engine and the way Free League does it is every genre that they do, they tweak the Year Zero engine to fit that genre. Twilight 2000 feels completely different than Forbidden Lands, which feels completely different than Coriolis, which is completely different than The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think that's where setting really comes into play. And like with Savage Worlds, Savage Worlds always had this in the beginning stages. I think it wasn't until, oh my God, version 4, which was the Deluxe Explorers Edition, right? If I'm counting correctly, where up to that point, Savage Worlds was always like, oh, it's only pulp. It's pulp fantasy. Oh, you're only doing pulp space. You're only doing pulp horror, pulp this, pulp that. And it was just like, no, you just don't understand what's in the book, because I don't know if it's a lack of comprehension or not. So yeah, I think there's that. And I think Year Zero engine is so far in its infancy, where like with Savage Worlds, Pinnacle did a lot of diverse settings, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. Because ETU, East Texas University, plays nothing similar to I don't know, like what Rippers or Riffs, and I think that's where YZE might be. Free League can do it, and when they do it, great, because it's their system, and they have untapped resources and wealth. They have all the gold from Fafnir apparently to do all their settings and get all their hookups in Hollywood, which bless them for that. But I think setting can make a difference. I will say this: if you recall, the first time I ran Task Force Raven, it was in 5th edition, which I know you don't remember. Yeah,
no, well, I do remember it. It's just in my head, I always remember it as Savage Worlds. But after you mentioned it was 5e, I do remember now that it was 5e, and I had to go back and look. But
and that was straight Player's Handbook stuff. I didn't write or change anything. All I did was assume, like, Barbarian, you strip away the fantasy trappings to use Savage Worlds. Okay, the Barbarian is really a saw gunner. He's your weapons and tactics sergeant. Awesome. Now you've got the dude who carries the big guns and explosives and all this jazz. Your thief, well, not thief in 5th edition. Your rogue becomes your case officer. That's all I really did. I just changed the trappings out on it. It seemed to work okay. I think the firefights would have the firefights would have been a little boring, you know, because you're still only doing like what 1d6, 1d8, 1d10 damage with your guns, and so you're still playing the game. But again, that comes into descriptive narration, which if people are watching my Daggerheart video where I tell people not to play Daggerheart because it's probably not for them, not the way they think. I think that's part of the problem with systems sometimes too. Yeah, I think it's a mechanical misunderstanding. Everyone thinks every hit point is a wound, and it's like, no, hit points are stress. And so it's like you're shooting these machine guns and stuff, and like you're going out and you're drilling down, and it's like, okay, cool, what am I doing damage? Well, the bullets are flying everywhere, you're destroying the foliage around them, you're cutting away the cover, and it's when you come down those are doing the hit points, and that represents that stress factor of not being able to function properly anymore. And then you get those last few rolls where you're actually digging those hit points down to zero. And okay, cool. Now those rounds are slamming home.
Though, I think that's where D&D fails for me in that type of a scenario. And what I mean by that is guns are deadly.
Yeah.
and in D&D, if you're at high enough level, guns are mosquito bites until you get to the end. And so that's one thing I've always liked about Savage Worlds is it is a much deadlier system, especially when you bring in the exploding dice and things like that. So Year Zero can suffer to some degree in that regard.
Yeah.
But I think Free League does a great job of compensating for it, especially in games that have guns. So like Coriolis, when the feedback is there was a lack of wow moments or progression didn't feel exciting. To me, that sounds like they weren't comfortable with the system, so they weren't trying things. And the progression to me has always been, what do I want my character to do? And so progression to me has always been really fun too, because now I can do this thing, or I've ranked up and I can cast more spells or whatever it is. So
I
wonder if it's just lack of, because they're not familiar with the system, they don't know exactly what they could do, and so it lacked all of these things.
Yeah, I'm sure, and it sounds like it was, if you're playing one shots, and we mentioned this before, one shots sort of discourage any investment of the system mastery, which not mastery like I want, you need to win Year Zero engine, but like you said, understanding exactly what you can do, because that usually will slowly develop as you're like, okay, I'm invested. And also part of it is, probably they weren't engrossed in the characters or the game anyway. Especially if you're a D&D diehard, you don't care. You're not breaking those chains on, and it's not just D&D. And I wrote that down. We'll come back to that in a second. But that's possible. It's just zero investment in the system whatsoever, or zero investment in what's going on, because you don't have true understanding of the mechanics, and you probably do what most people do, which is also on you as a player. If you got a game schedule and it's with an X system and it's a system you're familiar with, hey, feel free to crack the effing book open.
RTFM.
Just feel free to be an adult about things and check out some rules, or check out how your character class works if it's that kind of system, and all the rules that pertain to you. If you're a warrior, you need to understand how combat flows. That's going to be your thing. If you're a spellcaster, you should probably understand how the magic system works. That way you're not sitting there, wasting everyone's time, because that's very common, especially with people who want to play spellcasters. They want to do the cool thing but not have any effort and no responsibility or accountability to the game table, which is also kind of sad, because a lot of people don't have the hours to waste, especially in you want to kind of move on and get to the good stuff and have as much fun as humanly possible before your game ultimately collapses in 6 sessions.
Exactly.
But there was one thing. It was like the lethality of Year Zero engine discouraged investment. I think that is interesting, and I think that says more than almost anything else in the commentary. Because D&D has made superheroes. And people do not want to see their character die. In the Year Zero engine, your character is not really going to die. I mean, you got to roll pretty spectacularly crappy to have a character just die in Year Zero engine. You got to get those critical injuries, and you got to get them high 60s on those tables. If everyone's not tracking, you roll, D66, and the higher you roll, the worse it is. And, but you also have dwell time for your injuries. And so you may die in a stretch or, days. It could be there's on the chart. So I don't think Year Zero engine is lethal. I think it's I think you taken out of the action is highly probable because, you have in the step dice. Well, I guess it's in the dice pool system too. You have what, 4, 5 health, on
like
average. And the weapons always do a flat rate, which I am a huge fan of. I never thought I would ever say those words. But it was because of the mechanical nature of D&D and Savage Worlds that really broke me. There's nothing more depressingly stupid than I rolled 7 success. No, I rolled a success, 6 raises. I'm rolling damage, but it's capped out at how much extra damage I can roll. I roll the dice. I roll 4 damage. Get out of my face.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you didn't even all that amazing, and you didn't even get past the toughness to actually deal with, shake a thing, or like the D&D, like, oh my god, we're fighting the dragon. I roll a nat 20, 15 damage. Stop.
Yeah,
That's what I enjoyed about Rollmaster, knowing that my paladin at 30th level could be riding his horse and maybe had a bad night, drunk, high, whatever, because he's not a good paladin. And an accident happens, or and he falls off his horse and cracks his head and dies. That shit happens in real life. Well, I don't want real life. Okay, cool. Well, I also like knowing that a goblin sneak knife at the lowest levels could get real lucky.
Well, and that's what I've always liked about Savage Worlds as well, is a kid with a knife can get lucky and kill my legendary hero.
Right. And it's like, I don't get sad because I know the systems are designed for your characters probably salvageable.
Yeah,
if we're being honest, even in Neon Blood, you take some gun wounds and you can still be salvaged. The technology is there. Magic, you're gonna have magic in the systems. So it's like, okay, cool. If it's not salvageable, well, then you bring in like someone who was an NPC or on the periphery, like a strap hanger of your adventuring group, who maybe liked that character and thought him as a mentor, and now you bring in the Streak of Vengeance, and it gives you a new opportunity to role play. But again, I don't even know this is about understanding mechanics anymore. Now it just feels like
it's not. But I think it goes to show that it's okay for a system's mechanics not to jive with you or your group. That's okay.
Yeah.
But the thing that struck me is all of the complaints about it are the exact same things that I could say about D&D.
Yeah, right.
Or just about anything else. I mean, every game tries to standardize their mechanics. So there's a lack of mechanical diversity in every system out there because that takes cognitive load off of the GM because I don't have to remember all these little subsystems.
Yeah, no.
So. No.
And is D&D jive with you?
No, I will forever say now. I mean, it did. I love D&D. That's what I grew up with. That was the first game that I ever played. Loved it. But I will say that my favorite version of Dungeons and Dragons right now is Dragonbane from Free League.
Yeah, that or Castles and Crusades.
Yeah, which I haven't played yet, but I want to, because it sounds cool. Yeah, but what I really like about Dragonbane and what I really hate about D&D is the way skills are implemented. Because Dragonbane is a true skill-based system.
Yes.
And in D&D, they tack on skills because people are... I'm going to say either too lazy to figure out what attribute to roll against, because AD&D, you could do skills, you just roll under your attribute that it's tied to, right? Yeah. And now we have, roll persuasion or roll notice or roll whatever, evade, whatever it is. And it's like, it's all arbitrary, and you're proficient in this and this and this, and you're super proficient in whatever. And it's like,
mechanically though. So I think that's really just, you have to engage the rules. And I know some of them are tedious because some people choose the most obtuse, systems as humanly possible. Where it's just like, oh, you're proud that your tome is 500 pages long, bro. You could cut all of this nonsense down. But as we're nearing on the 32-minute mark, I will bring up what I think the real problem is for a lot of people when it comes to game systems, learning game systems, and being engaged in mechanics and understanding the mechanics. Brand. You have people who are never going to not want to play the brand. And the D&Ds, the cyberpunk, even though there are better fantasy games out there than D&D, there are much better cyberpunk games out there. Neon Blood being one of them. But aside from that, there are always better games. But there are people who are so, and it's not they're loyal to the brand, they're loyal to the idea of the brand. You're like, oh man, it was so dope. Did you see Stranger Things? Yeah, man, they're playing Dungeons and Dragons. That's so awesome. I play Dungeons and Dragons. What do you play? Oh, I play Black Hack. And there are people who just don't want that. They, in their head, they are, and the people who are like, people will see this and disagree. Okay, cool. Go read Bernays' book called Propaganda, and then read his follow-on book once the Cold War started, where he realized the word propaganda was not positive influence anymore, called PR, public relations. The dude wrote the book on this, and you walk yourself through it. There's only one reason that women start smoking Lucky Stripes with a stupid green package that looked like a Christmas tree ornamentation, is because he hired a bunch of models to wear green dresses and be present smoking Lucky Strikes. And he changed it just like that because people are dumb. And yeah, so stop being loyal to brands. It's ridiculous. You don't have to be in the zeitgeist for everything.
Yeah,
that's the crazy part. And that's why I'm kind of glad at WotC maybe taking a backseat to some things. And hell, I'd like to see other games get, and I know they get discussed, but they don't get played. You go to a convention, it's going to be 5th edition or Pathfinder,
or Shadow Dark now.
Or Shadow Dark. Well, Shadow Dark doesn't bother me. Like, I'm glad that that's being played.
Oh, I am as well. I am as well. I still have my issues with it, but yeah, I mean,
yeah, sure.
I think it's great that I am happy for Kelsey. That's amazing.
Yes,
what she's been able to accomplish.
Right. My problem with Shadow Dark, like, I'll register for a Shadow Dark game in the con coming up, but like, I always give it my all. You've played with me before. You played with me enough. I will go all in. I just know, once again, the game will suck because I'm going to sit at the table with the game master who doesn't know the goddamn rules or thinks they know the rules, and it just can't run a game to save their lives because they're just boring human beings. Yeah. And with that,
so what you're saying is you're signing up for my Shadow Dark game, and now I know what you think about me.
It's just, some people run these games and it's just like, it's just, it's frustrating. It's like, actual play, D&D is not supposed to be a spectator sport. False. You're an idiot and a liar, and you can't be more wrong, because Critical Role is crushing your ass in numbers alone. And it's like, oh, they script it, they do this, they do that. No, maybe, who knows? Matt Mercer knows how to run a game, and his players are of the same vein. Now, I've seen them run games, and they're terrible as game masters. Not everyone who's a good player can be a good game master. It's just not. That doesn't translate well. And good game masters aren't always good players. I've seen Matt Mercer play, and he did not. He played the Deadlands game, and I didn't think he was a good player. But he knows how to run a game. There are other people who you can watch and be like, man, that person, they are entertaining to watch. Like, it's not like, but it's like, oh man, this is really fluidly moving. And then unfortunately their players have to open their mouths, and it's just, dick and fart jokes or nonsense, or they're not invested, or, they're just, it's crazy. So like, he got really lucky because he has players entertaining. But yeah, I hear that excuse a lot. Like, oh, it's just not entertaining. All right, well, I ran a game for a very large online channel, and it had thousands of views and thousands of live viewers, and they are very entertained. So yeah, it's nonsense. I have people stop at conventions and will stand and watch what I'm running, especially I'm running like Spirit of 76. There are people who would just pause and, well, you saw at the convention, I think we were at Tupelo, right? There were folks standing around watching us. Yeah, it's just, it's your gregarity and how you run a game. You can't just be like, all right, Rich, there's a skeleton coming at you. He swings at you. 7's a miss. What do you do? Like, get the fuck out of here with that. Get out of here with that. If that's what you want to do, and that's your excuse as to why it's not a spectator sport, awesome. I'm just telling you, you're boring.